You know, when you mentioned that, I was surprised. I want to be upfront and honest. I always thought it was already digitized. Generally, how do you apply for these forms? It's online.
Yeah. I think portions were digitized, but now he says the entire process is going to be seamless.
Which portions were analog? I'd like to know. I mean, sometimes I think it's important that when new information comes into our purview, we, the commentators here, should address our lack of knowledge of a particular piece of information.
Right.
I've always been of a view that across the Ghana Armed Forces, it is always online, digital, and never analog. These paper applications are a thing of the past. And I've been of that view for the last number of years. So for me to hear this is a surprise to me and maybe many other viewers as well. Why? Because we know that it's online portal. In fact, government made a key point, especially in the NPP administration, that in order to avoid these Goro boys who would give you a form, say they can assure you of a slot and hoodwink you and take your money, okay, the whole online digital portal served to cure that cancer. Are you following me? So I'm surprised at this, but if that is the case, then yes, it's a step in the right direction. But I again, to reiterate what I said, I was of the view that across the board, it was online. It was online. You know, what Elvis mentioned about going to Ghana Commercial Bank, the idea is that you purchase the e-voucher or e-ticket. Again, I thought it's something that can be done on Momo. When you're applying for your passports, again, you can use your debit cards, your Momo, that's your mobile money for those watching outside of Ghana, to do that. But to address your question, is what the Minister of Interior now stating good? If that is the case, as you're saying, that portions are outside of the digital ecosystem, then yes, it can only, my answer can only be it's good. A
fully fledged digital system for recruitment.
Yeah, I mean, it's fine, but this, let's not understand something. It is not the digital or lack of environment that caused the stampede. It could help it, yes, and I agree with what my colleagues have mentioned in terms of, and we mentioned it last week, how having that data can help you stagger, you know, the recruitment process. So you know that you have X number of people coming on this particular day and Y number on another day, so you can control it. The Ghana Armed Forces were saying, per their reports, that what happened was that there was a large number which was added to by people who were not scheduled to be there on that day. That in no way, shape or form absolves the Ghana Armed Forces. You are our experts in defense. You need to be 3 or 4 or 5 steps ahead of the curve. You have to have a contingency plan. If this happens, what happens here? You know, the permutations need to be well thought out. That's your area of expertise. I'm talking the Ghana Armed Forces. So when they say that those who were not scheduled arrived and compounded the problem, that is something that nobody should take as a valid excuse. Because you should have that contingency in place.
Should have anticipated the surge in numbers.
And I mentioned last week that as crowds were growing, what should you have done, Ghana Armed Forces? Send your officers into the queue and check per person whether or not you are scheduled to be there that day. Because we know ourselves as Ghanaians, we want to jump the queue. We want to avoid the law. You know, discipline isn't something that we hold dear, like you see with the Japanese. A Japanese person at a red traffic light, no cars in sight, will wait until the light changes green before he walks or crosses the road. You see that so much in Japan. It's middle of the night, 11 p.m., no cars coming. That Japanese person will wait until the light changes green, then cross. Ghana, while the articulated truck is coming, we're trying to compete with it when it's saying red. So discipline is something that we need to imbibe in ourselves. And since you know this is a failing of ours, I'm talking Ghana Armed Forces, why not send officers into the queue? They started sleeping there from 10 p.m. the previous night.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that. But taking a proactive measure, Ghana Armed Forces, your office in the queue, please let me see your application. Oh, Massa, you're not due for today. Please go home. You're due for tomorrow. They didn't do that. So they cannot now rely on that excuse that others entered. What were you doing to monitor those in the queue, whether they were relevant? Secondly, on the issue of them, the compensation being given, I call it compensation, it's in good order. I have no issue there because the caveat is qualified persons from your family.
True.
I was reading, is it Oliver Baker Vamoa,
yeah,
saying that it's unconstitutional and what have you. I totally disagree with him, and I'll explain to you why. The military has so many sectors whereby you have your military, the infantry personnel, you have a civilian division, you have mechanics, you have drivers, you have engineers, you have plumbers, people who are in carpentry, whose specific skills. You work for the Ghana Armed Forces, but you are in the mechanics workshop. You're not there with your AK-47, you know, and your backpack in the field or serving in Sudan or Lebanon or where have you. So there are ways in which qualified members of the family can be accommodated within the armed forces. My colleagues have mentioned it, and I think that's in good order. It speaks to a sense of justice, a sense of reparation, which is called for. When we have a disaster in Ghana, unfortunately, it is government's responsibility where let's say the public or government agencies have been either found wanting or if not found wanting, are in a capacity to help mitigate that disaster, we should do so. Is it unconstitutional when we had the gas explosion that cleared the town? Was it? I don't know. Where? Apiache. Would Oliver Baker Vamoa say that it is unconstitutional to use a public purse to compensate and rebuild those homes as we did under the MPP administration? So I totally depart with that kind of rhetoric or thinking, and anybody who shares Oliver Baker's view. This is not only constitutional. What's the Constitution? It's the government's responsibility to serve the interests of the public. I mean, I'm not quoting verbatim, but the essence, the spirit of the Constitution, it's the law by which the government and the public relate and work, so that we work with government, and government also works in our interests as Ghanaian citizens. So that one, I'm 100% in support of that gesture, and the qualified aspect of it, I think, can allay people's fears that we're getting unqualified people from these 6 families to actually enter the services. And so we commend government on that particular aspect. But what can we do? I want to relate something that I mentioned to you last week. In 2021, we didn't do recruitment. In 2022, we didn't do recruitment. 2023 also, MPP government did not do recruitment into the armed forces. And you ask yourself, why? And I explained this last week. We have over 10,000 people qualified already on the system of the Ghana Armed Forces.
So there's a backlog.
There's a backlog of Ghanaians who are qualified per your own criteria to be absorbed into the military. So why the need to actually engage in this exercise when you have a backlog? It beats the imagination. Because you can't tell me that suddenly they're now unqualified.
But it's been 4 years.
It's been 4 years.
Some may have traveled out of the country. Some may have fallen sick. Are all 10,000 still eligible for enlistment?
And we discussed this last week. Go through the process and find out, because it's an assumption that all have traveled, that some have fallen sick. And sure, there'll be a proportion of that. But you need 4,000 people. Are you telling me that suddenly all 10,000 are dead? That we have to be realistic to the reality. So the Ghana Armed Forces have a question to answer. And by that same argument, the government of Ghana has a question to answer. Because who gives the directive? Is it not the Minister of Defense and his deputies working with the Ghana Armed Forces that we need to fill these vacancies? And surely the GAF would have said, thank you, government, we need this amount of money for these vacancies, but we have 10,000 people already here. And that's something that I think this investigation needs to look at as critically as possible. Because we know, for example, that recruitment, unemployment, these are signals that can trigger an election loss. And so governments are mindful how to cure the unemployment cancer or canker, and how to also sometimes present we are doing something, giving you hope. But don't give false hope that leads to this tragedy. You have 10,000 there in your backlog. If the MPP government seeking re-election said, no, we won't do recruitment, we won't do it in 2021, 2022, 2023, and I believe 2024. I'm sure those who are Googling can correct me if I'm wrong. But there was no recruitment. Where the recruitment took place in July of 2024, the notice came out, and it came out in immigration and also the armed forces. I'm not saying recruitment didn't take place, but we saw it in the newspapers. It was advertised. 2024, an election year. MPP government said that those who have qualified from 2021 and 2022 and 2023, please resubmit your names, not by another form, but you can again access the portal and resubmit your application. This is something that the NDC government needs to be aware of, so that in pandering, trying to think to the next election, instead of thinking of the next generation, we get ourselves in this mess. And I'm not trying to somehow blame the government on what happened. That's not my submission here. Because as I mentioned last week, these were individuals who avoided protocol, didn't care about those who were already in the queue, jumped it, and then it led to the stampede. Having said that, the Ghana Armed Forces have admitted that at Elbak Stadium, only one of the gates was opened instead of the two. That would have relieved the tension. What you do in any stampede, you don't try to contain the masses, you try to allow them in. And that's the failure again of the Ghana Armed Forces on that end. But as I say, I'm not critiquing or blaming government for the stampede, but there are ingredients that make the meal.
Right.
And they should not somehow say we are washing our hands of. You have a cause, I'm talking government, in this scenario. What should have been done is take the backlog, use that. Do you get me? Because I remember we had, was it Sam George, Honorable Sam George, and Honorable Roxon, saying that we should actually increase
the age.
Which has now been done. Because
Now-
the minister in his briefing has said it has been
Yes.
done.
Now, when you increase the age, and I know that Ghana, in fact, when you look at its age compared to other African countries, Ghana is quite strict. But can you imagine, we're talking about 60,000 now. You increase the age, and why did they say increase the age? Because they're getting party pressure. And Roxon admitted it, per what I've read. My party people are pressuring me that we need jobs. You imagine increasing the age? Astaghfirullah, God forbid. From 60,000 applicants, you're looking at 120,000 applications. Given that the Ghana Armed Forces should, if they maintain this non-preemptive, archaic, and I loved what Elvis mentioned just now. Why do we put them in this hot sun at Elwak? It's a lesson for us to learn.
But the minister has said that going forward, about 10 to 15 centers will be open.
Good. And I mentioned that last week. I said you could use the Teshi military facility, Burma camp, and Michel camp in our conversation last week. That there are military centers dotted across the country that can provide these facilities to recruit the armed forces. Instead of out in this open air, open sun facility. So I'm happy that Elvis made that submission to draw attention to it. But having said that, for the last 8 years, taking out the 2021, 2, and 23 that I mentioned, NPP did not openly recruit, but leaned on its backlog. This recruitment at Elwak has taken place in the hot sun. So we have to ask ourselves the question, why in the last, say, 6 years of active recruitment did we not have this? These are the lessons that we can draw upon. And it's not to hit a political note, it's just a lesson. Because it could have happened, but thankfully it didn't. Then you have to ask yourselves, what was the Ghana Armed Forces doing right up until this point in terms of recruitment?
Very well.
And when we answer that question, now we can add value to it, which the present administration, per what the Minister of Interior is saying, is doing.
Very well. Doc, I'll give you